Hey, this is Cody Hosterman from Pure Storage. I'm going to be demonstrating some of the new features of my FlashArray Workflow Package version 1.7 for vRealize Orchestrator. So we're logged into vRealize Orchestrator here. I have my latest release of the workflow package imported, and I have a bunch of new workflows. So a lot of them come around managing snapshots and multiple volumes at a time and that kind of stuff. So what we're looking at right here, and the one thing you'll notice is I have changed my password and username for the FlashArray to be attributes and saved that credentials in there instead of having it as an input. But by default, when you import it, it's going to ask you for the username and password in this wizard. So I'm going to choose my FlashArray, and I'm going to choose a cluster I want to provision to. And what this workflow does is allows you to provision multiple volumes at once. So you give it basically a name, and then the workflow is going to create all those volumes, attach to the right host group, rescan the cluster, and format all of them as VMFS using that name and then another number. So I'm going to create 3 different volumes. I'm going to give it VRO prod VMFS as a prefix name, and then the workflow is going to add some numbers. And I'm going to make them all 8 terabytes. So this workflow is going to kick off. First thing it's going to do is correlate the cluster. All right, I gave you a vCenter cluster. What host group on the FlashArray does that correlate to? And then it's going to create all the volumes, name them appropriately, attach it to that host group, and now what we're doing is rescanning my VMware environment. So if I look at my host group, my Jets host group, the one I chose earlier, you can see those volumes have been created and connected to that host group. If I go back to VRO, we can see we're at the rescan, and now it's starting to actually create those data stores inside of ESX. Essentially what this workflow is doing is grabbing the first ESX host in that cluster and using that one to format the VMFS volumes. So the workflow is done. If we go back into vCenter, we can now see my data stores have been created. Give it a refresh here. VRO prod VMFS 0, 1, and 2. So the 3 volumes I wanted to create. So great. So now I'm done whatever. I put some VMs on it and all kind of stuff. But now let's say we want to spin up some copies of it, or we want to protect it and so forth. What do we do now? Well, let's start add these data stores to a protection group workflow. So what the add data stores to protection group workflow is going to do is going to take all those VMFS data stores, figure out which array they're on, which volumes are, and add them to a protection group that you choose. So I'm going to choose my data stores, the ones I just created, VRO prod VMFS 0, 1, and 2, and add them. Now, a protection group can only span one FlashArray. So this workflow's input, what it actually does is make sure all those data stores are on the same FlashArray. So if I go into my other vCenter and add a data store that's on a different FlashArray and add it in and accept it, you'll see there's an error saying, hey, these data stores are on different FlashArrays. You need to make sure they're all on the same one because a protection group is for a single FlashArray only. So I'll remove that so I have my 3. And then I'll go ahead and enter the FlashArray that I want to confirm putting in that protection group. So this is basically a confirm it. You can actually put more than one in there if you're not sure which FlashArray those volumes are on. So now I'm going to choose my protection group. That protection group is auto-populated by an action that I have in the workflow package that returns all the protection groups for that array. So you can see I have a protection group here called VRO group. It just has a local snapshot schedule. It's not actively replicating to another array. So this is really only being used for local snapshots. And you can see I have a whole bunch of old snapshots, but currently no volumes in that protection group right now. So I want to add these 3 volumes, those 3 data stores, to that protection group. So it's done. Just a couple of API calls. That's pretty quick. If we go back to my array, give it a good old refresh here, we can see that those volumes have been added to that protection group. So now let's actually create a snap. When you take a snapshot of a protection group, it's going to create a write consistent snapshot for all the volumes in that protection group. So we actually want to create it. So let's say we put some VMs on and that kind of stuff. So we're going to choose my protection group, and then I want to give that snapshot a suffix name. And I also have the option to replicate it. That protection group is not a replicating one, so it won't do anything. But I do want to apply the retention. So that means that snapshot will be deleted in accordance to the retention policy of that protection group. So I've created a new snapshot. If I go back to my protection group on my array GUI, I can see if I refresh this here that I have a new point-in-time snapshot. Inside of that point in time are all the individual snapshots for my individual volumes in that protection group. As I mentioned before, they're all write consistent because it's a consistency group. So I've created a new snapshot. Now let's say I want to spin up some dev test copies of it. So for every volume, every snapshot in that protection group for that point in time, I want to spin up that data store in my environment. So what I'm going to do is I originally provisioned those source volumes to my Jets cluster. I want to provision my dev test to my Giants cluster, which is 3 other hosts in my vCenter. So I'm going to choose the FlashArray I want to spin up my volumes from, and then that'll populate the protection groups on that FlashArray. Now I can give it a unique name. So what the new volumes I'm going to create from these snapshots, I'll give it a name. And I also have the option to, after I resignature these new volumes from those snapshots, do I want to rename them too? So I'm going to say yes, I want to rename those VMFS volumes to that same name. And furthermore, I also have an action that returns all the snapshot points and times in that protection group. So I'm going to choose the one I want. So now it's going to take all those snapshots from that protection group, those 3 snapshots. It's going to create new volumes out of them, connect it to the proper host group for that cluster, my Giants. You can see they've been created and presented. If I click on one of these, you can see it was sourced from that VRO prod VMFS from that snapshot. Same with the other ones, right? So at this point, it's connected. It's going to rescan my VMware environment, and I should start seeing the resignature operation starting here pretty soon to actually start mounting those copies. So there they are. There's the resignature operations for my 3 unresolved volumes. So it'll go ahead and resignature them, and then when it's done resignaturing those volumes, it's going to then go and we're going to rename it. Because I mentioned before, I selected an option to, I want to make sure the name is consistent with my VMFS and with the source underlying FlashArray volume that hosts it. So the resignaturing is complete. And now it's going through and renaming the data store. So you can see there's one of them that hasn't been renamed yet with that original snap prefix and then the old name, but it's going and renaming them, and so that'll go away and will be renamed just like the other 2 have already been done. So great. So I have my 3 original volumes in one cluster, my 3 dev test volumes in the other cluster. So now I can go and run my dev test, register my VMs, do what I need to do with that data set in my dev test. And once I'm done with it, I can use my delete FlashArray volumes workflow to get rid of them. So I can enter in any number of volumes, and these can be on any FlashArray. There's no requirement here. So I can choose any volumes I want. So I'll choose my 3 dev test ones because let's say I'm done with them now. And I'll add them to the list to delete. Confirm the FlashArray that they're on. And once again, this is just really a search mechanism. So I can actually add any number of FlashArrays in there, and it'll figure out the right FlashArray for each data store automatically. So if you're not entirely sure which FlashArrays those data stores are on, just add all of them. It'll be fine. So what this is going to do, it's going to go and unmount and detach all those VMFS volumes from every ESX server. Once it's done with that, it's going to go to the FlashArray and then disconnect those volumes. And then it's going to rescan my VMware cluster to make sure those devices. So it's going to follow VMware and Pure Storage best practices for removing VMFS volumes. Unmount, detach, then disconnect and rescan. That makes sure that they're not improperly removed from the host themselves. So it's going to move through those, iterating one at a time to remove those volumes. As you can see, the logging mechanism is showing what's going on, which host, and all that kind of stuff. And you can also kind of follow the workflow around inside of VRO by seeing which is kind of lit up in green. So we'll see the volumes slowly go inactive as everything is unmounted and detached. And now they're all inactive because they've all been removed. And the rescan will kick off right now, and the volumes are gone. And now we're clear, we just have our regular production volumes. So that's a quick demonstration of some of the new features in this workflow package. There's a lot more, so read the blog post above talking about this, and I'll be updating this quite a bit in the future. Thank you.